Jason, I know in the last episode where we had you on the show, you really dug into your story and your background. On today's show, I want you to give us some of the highlights of that, and then we'll maybe pick some unique aspects of your story to dig into. But start by giving the audience a little bit of background into, how you got into real estate in the first place.
I got started in real estate back in 2000. So if I do the math correctly, I think that's almost 22 years, which seems incredible to me. But commercial real estate is this thing I want to get into. Had no idea what I was talking about, but I knew that there were some people doing some really cool things within that world. And I jumped in, talked to 3 or 4 different companies. And before I knew it, I was an office broker. Jumped in and literally knew nothing. So I got my license back in 2000 and then became a broker calling on office tenants all over greater Chicago. That kind of evolved over time and got bigger and bigger. Had some ups and downs. First couple of years in commercial brokerage stinks. No matter what you hear out there, it always stinks. But you managed to get through it, and it became a very profitable venture for me. And that just sort of evolved over time. I got more into the investment side, and you start making larger and larger checks. You make the larger commissions, and you say, gosh, I just don't want to work for the next commission. I want to get into the world of investment. And so I started doing the one-off type of deals, and those got bigger and bigger and had some successes, had some losses. And then that evolved into doing it more professionally. And that's where it kind of took off. That was probably 10 years into the world of commercial real estate. And then I started taking some pretty large gambles at that point. Then the story turns a bit. So it's interesting. I think the last time we talked, we talked about all the positive stuff. We talked about all the great successes and the wins and the things where you cheer and everybody likes to jump up and down. But it hasn't always been easy. We've had the ups and downs over time. I've been through a few cycles within the real estate market. I think everybody's felt these. It seems like once every 8, 9, 10 years or so, we go through this up and down cycle within the real estate world. I have personally hit a couple of those in my time in this business. One that hit me specifically, it was in 2008. I don't know if you remember what happened in 2008. The whole world fell apart. It was in 2008 that I decided I wanted to create my first real venture. I was still a broker, but I wanted to go out and start buying properties. And I thought that I could go out and raise capital and make all kinds of magic happen. Unfortunately, 2008 and the recession hit. My venture capital, my investors that came along with me all ran for the hills. As quickly as they committed to me, they ran away. So before I could spend any of their money, I was all alone on my little island. And I was one of those guys that decided that no matter what, I was going to figure it out and I was going to succeed anyway. So I decided to tackle the market on my own, with my own cash, with my own risk, with everything else. And that turned out to be one of the biggest learning moments of my life. So what happened was I ended up going long on some real estate ventures that I should have never gone long on. And then once I figured out that I shouldn't have gone long on them, I doubled down like any silly investor does. And so I took out one investment and then did another investment to make up for what I thought was going to be a loss. And then I did another one and they all stacked up. At some point, it all falls apart. And that's what happened to me. So it all came crashing down with the recession that went on for a good couple of years. And I had to recreate myself again, all the while I was still a broker. So throughout this whole process, I was still making money through my brokerage business, but I was losing even more money on my investments. So I learned a huge lesson at that point that I need to listen to the market. I need to listen to my partners, and I need to understand why people are running for the hills. And when people are running for the hills, sometimes you should run with them. So in that case, I didn't, but I learned a lot, and we recreated ourselves, and we ended up coming out with smiles on our faces. But at the time, I thought it was pretty painful. Yeah. But that took me to where we are today. So a good life lesson. Since then, we've recovered nicely. We made some really nice investments. Things have turned around. Got a number of investment partners that have been along with me along the way over the years, and we do very well. So it's been a good venture.
What happened in 2008 was your stepping stone into being able to do this at scale on a much bigger level with partners and with a lot bigger impact. So.
Well, it's interesting. As I've raised money over the years, I've often told people about my story in 2008, 2009. And I'm not alone. A lot of people have faced issues like this. And I think of it as kind of a traumatic experience. I remember, if I really take a look back at what it was like in 2008, I went from the euphoria of saying, I'm going to go do this thing. I'm going to go create this thing, to all of a sudden the bottom falling out of it and saying, what did I do? And the reality is there are a ton of people out there who face the same thing. It might not have been in 2008 or 2009. Maybe it was last year. Maybe it was 20 years ago. But most people in the world of investment in some way have hit an issue where it's just knocked them off their feet. And they say, I didn't know how I was going to recover. And when you share in those stories, when you're open about those stories and you talk about them honestly, it creates a level of trust. What I've found is that in most situations, when you talk to people that just tell you all the wonderful things that they've done, all the great things, rainbows and unicorns and all the good stuff, usually they're hiding something. They're not telling you the full truth. There's often the downturn, and it's not necessarily bad. It's momentarily bad, but overall, it's what helps you create yourself and creates what you are today. And so my whole point is, when I've explained that story to people over the years, it makes them kind of like me as a human being. It brings them in. It makes them feel very comfortable with me because I'm just a human. I'm a normal person. I've taken risks. I've taken gambles. They haven't all worked, but some have worked really, really well. And so it's a nice story when you bring it all together. Not always easy, but it's just my story. It's what I've gone through.